killer tried to remove all evidence of the crime, but in the process created entirely new forensic evidence that almost had investigators stumped. Until scientists tried a technique that had never been used in a criminal case, and in doing so, made forensic history. Goes to raise her 6-month-old daughter, Avery.
She was a happy person. She had her troubled times just like any other teenager does. She was a great mom. She was a very dedicated mom.
Rochelle was going through an unpleasant divorce and lived alone with her daughter close to the center of town. Around 7:30 in the morning on a warm spring day in 2004, Rochelle's mother stopped by to visit. Inside, she found Avery on the bed, alone, but she couldn't find Rochelle.
I started calling her name. She didn't answer. I started looking in the closets and under her bed, and I couldn't find her.
There were signs that something had happened. The bed was moved, and the headboard had fallen forward. A nightstand was pushed away from the wall. But Rochelle's purse and her car were still there. On the kitchen floor was a possible clue. It was Rochelle's divorce petition, and on it, a large shoe print, as if someone had stomped on it.
Because it would indicate that someone other than Rochelle was in that home the night that she disappeared.
Rochelle's mother called her soon-to-be ex-son-in-law, Andrew Tollison, to brief him on the situation.
I said, Andrew, we can't find Rochelle. We can't find her anywhere. He said he couldn't leave work right now.
Police questioned as many of the town's residents as they could and organized a search party to look in every field and pasture.
The search was huge. There was just an immediate reaction all over the place. ATVs, four-wheel drive vehicles, horseback, on foot. It was a phenomenal response.
For 5 days, the search continued with no trace of Rochelle anywhere.
I honestly believe that there was a lot of people that maybe didn't know Rochelle very well, that were thinking, oh, well, you know, she just ran off.
I know her. She just would never leave Avery. She wouldn't leave her alone for a second. I mean, that was her oxygen. She loved her so much.
Then, a man hiking on state land about 10 miles from Rochelle's home discovered the charred remains of a young female. Dental records confirmed the victim was Rochelle Tollison.
About 100 feet away from where the body was located, there was a pit, an open area, where they found several logs. They found an area that appeared to have been burned in.
I'd spent many hours with her mother, and to have to go back and tell her, we found her body, but you can't see her. You can't identify your daughter. You can't touch her and tell her goodbye. That was hard.
I don't know, my heart just stopped. And I couldn't believe it. I needed proof. I don't know what else to say.
The investigation would be difficult. The killer burned Rochelle's body to destroy any evidence. But police certainly knew where to start.
I think it just split them up. And I think Rochelle just realized, or felt like, I should say, that she wasn't going to get anywhere. And that it was time to move on.
Andrew had an alibi for the night of Rochelle's murder. He said he was at a party with friends. One of them drove him home later, and Andrew said he didn't leave his home again until the next morning to go to work.
He was heavily intoxicated during that night, and we had evidence that confirmed that he had been at his home the entire night because of his intoxication.
His alibi appeared to check out until investigators learned there was a bonfire at that party. This was an interesting coincidence since Rochelle's body had been burned in a fire pit. So Lieutenant Larry Smart wanted to know if there was any connection between the bonfire and the crime scene.
Hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and you will see it immediately.
The spark, known as a plasma cloud, contains all the chemical elements from the sample. A spectrometer identifies those elements. Most of the elements were typical, but one was not.
This one had titanium, which really jumped out at me. We saw consistently titanium across the whole spectrum.
Titanium doesn't naturally occur in wood. and this suggested that the mesquite tree was growing near an industrial area where titanium polluted the groundwater. 11 logs were tested, 8 from the crime scene and 3 from the bonfire. All had the exact same chemical makeup. Mendoza was out on bail for one of those crimes when Rochelle disappeared. A search of his home turned up a pair of boots. They were covered in soot and smelled of gasoline. To see whether these boots matched the print found in Rochelle's home, investigators sent them to forensic analyst Michael Villarreal. He made test impressions of the soles and then did a visual comparison with the partial print from Rochelle's house.
Once I noticed that there were similarities in the size, shape, and design, I did take a look for specific accidental characteristics and see if the accidental characteristics on the shoe were also present in the partial heel impression.
Accidental characteristics result from how a shoe is worn. They are unique to each set of shoes. In this case, the boot print on the divorce decree was remarkably clear, perfect for comparison. Cut marks in the heel of the boot left no doubt.
I was able to determine that the submitted shoes, in this case, did make that partial impression to the exclusion of all others.
What they found was this. It was an exact match.
Police also tested a pair of soot-covered jeans from Mendoza's house. Underneath the soot were tiny blood stains. The DNA profile of the blood matched Rochelle Tolleson. Homicide investigators confronted Mendoza with the forensic evidence.
It was like he didn't care. He was detached from the whole situation, had no remorse, was a very cold person.
It didn't seem real. I woke up the next day and I was like, man, that seemed like a dream. And
evidence indicates there was a struggle. Rochelle's divorce petition fell to the floor, which Mendoza stepped on with his left boot. Clear proof he was there. Where he took Rochelle afterwards is unclear. DNA testing found Rochelle's blood on Mendoza's jeans. Later, he used some of the mesquite wood to start the fire in the deserted state park in an attempt to incinerate all evidence of the murder. While he may have gotten rid of some forensic evidence, he unwittingly created more, which provided an unmistakable forensic link between Mendoza and the crime scene.
Forensics could match it back to the same tree, not to the same grove or the same type of tree, but to the same tree. And those are the types of results we expect to see in DNA, not in trees or vegetables.
3 months after Rochelle's death, Moises Mendoza was tried and convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death.
It's unreal. And I think that it probably puts a lot of people's minds at ease, knowing that they can do these types of things.
It's just phenomenal what they can do now, and I have tried to convince the younger detectives that they really need to stay in touch with the scientists and on all the new technology that's involved here, because that's going to be the future of law enforcement, is the forensics, if it's not already.